I'm from the DC area. I've been in telecom and healthcare and education for about 30 years. The company I work for is called Kajeet. We are an IoT solutions management company. We were founded about 20 years ago. Kind of started off in the education space, trying to close the digital divide for those students that didn't have access, and then expanded from there into lots of other sectors, which I'll get into as we go. So I can just tell you from my own background, I'm a through and through propeller head. I'm not wearing it today, but I love the technology, what we can do with technology, how we can improve lives. I love the futurist view of where we're going. I'm not scared that robots are going to take over the world. I just try to make sure that I'm very nice to Alexa and Siri so that when that happens, they don't take revenge on me. So let's start off with, okay, is this a little bit better? I'll just get a little more intimate with the mic here. So I thought I'd just start off with the state of the IoT market. So a few things that I think shock people when you think about how fast technology is growing. I've heard a couple of places here, talking about Moore's Law and how new solutions are coming to market so fast in various sectors. There's 127 new devices that hit the internet every second. I mean, think about that. How many people there are on the planet? It ends up being somewhere in the billions every year that get added. It's pretty extraordinary. The amount of data generated by these devices is expected to reach 73 zettabytes. I don't know, it goes terabytes, petabytes, and then 12 other things until we get the zettabytes. It's insane. By 2025. Fortunately, 83% of organizations have said that they've improved their efficiency, sometimes even their revenue and productivity. 83% of them by using IoT technology. Unfortunately, about 48% of those businesses admit that they're unable to detect IoT security breaches on their network. It's very difficult when you're talking about so many new devices, so many new use cases hitting the market all at once, being new devices connected, new kinds of solutions to keep those secure. So that's just a few things about the market. And the fact that it's moving so fast, I was talking to my son before I came out here. He's 23 and he makes fun of me because he says, Dad, I can't believe sometimes that you lived in a time when there was no internet. Just how did you get around? We use maps. How did you do this? How did you do that? And I laugh at him now because as he's about to go off and get married in the next year and have his own kids, I say to him, well, just remember that one day your kids are going to tell you, I can't believe you used to have to sit behind a steering wheel and actually move a car instead of just getting in a car and having it take you somewhere. And your grandkids are going to be making fun of you because they're going to say, Grandpa, I can't believe you don't know how to use a hologram booth. Who takes regular vacations anymore? I mean, the stuff that we can't even think about or couldn't think about 20 years ago is happening every day. And the cycle just keeps getting faster and faster. It's really exciting for a lot of people like myself. And so what is important when you start talking about IoT? One of the things that doesn't get discussed as much, a lot of people think about there's a lot of things you can do with IoT devices. But what I think is really understated is how intelligent those IoT devices and connections can be. My definition of intelligent IoT is when we use the network, the application device information, all aggregated to derive data insights on whatever that IoT activity happens to be. That can be used by humans to make decisions, or it can be used by machines to tell other machines what's going on so that they can take automated actions. Ultimately, we're trying to have an improved outcome. And so, I would say that that the number of devices and the connectivity of disparate devices and disparate solutions is starting to really come together into an ecosystem. And if you can't manage the ecosystem from the beginning to the end, then you're really missing out on a lot of crucial opportunities. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but it has to be timely, it has to be accurate, salient, digestible, and most importantly, actionable. Because just putting information, there's a sea of information. We just talked about, I don't know how many zettabytes. To take that information and boil it down to something that somebody can take an action on is where the real value happens to be. So we're going to talk a little bit about some examples of that today. Where we're seeing a lot of growth in the use of IoT And as I mentioned, we kind of started off in the education sector almost 20 years ago with the simple mission, connections for good. We wanted to be able to connect students to their classrooms, give them the tools that they needed to succeed, and for educators to be able to make that possible. Interestingly enough, during the beginning of COVID, I believe there was 1 week, I think it was in August, where we had orders for whether it's a smart spot or embedded Chromebook or whatever it was to connect students to their classroom. I think we filled nearly 500,000 orders in the space of a week or 2 weeks. It was insane. It was like we're on the stock market in 1987 when there was a crash. Everybody's like, I want 50, give me 50,000, I want 10,000 of those. Like, we were buying every device on the market and trying to get them out there because suddenly COVID changed everything. Everybody needed to be remotely connected, in this particular case for schools. Well, the same thing happened for healthcare. Nobody wants to go to the hospital anymore. Nobody even wants to go to the doctor anymore. Once they open the floodgates for telehealth, I mean, I believe the stats said something like 38% of the people that tried it were nervous about trying it for the first time, but after they tried it the first time, it grew to 93% that were confident in wanting to do another telehealth session. Well, guess what? If the insurers and the government are now making that acceptable for billing purposes and people have gotten used to doing things from home, that genie's not going back in the bottle. So think of that extended now beyond just telehealth and how much easier it is to see a doctor for things that you don't necessarily have to go in face to face, but also then how that affects the market in terms of remote patient monitoring, in-home hospitals, things like that. It is just going to continue to grow, and as it becomes more and more acceptable and people start to see that technology, invest into it, and lean into it, it is going to expand like crazy. We're looking at $266 billion by 2026 alone, according to Forbes. Transportation, the assets that we move. We were talking about a supply chain crunch right now, but think of everything from toilet paper to baby formula or whatever. Being able to take low dollar and know where those things are and the supply chain and logistics of that, to high dollar things like cars and expensive computer equipment, etc. To be able to know where that is, logistically get it to the right place, being able to use technology to make that better, cheaper, faster is increasingly becoming an absolute necessity. And in fact, one of the things that I would say with transportation that's become more and more cost effective and certainly much more drives a lot more ability for intelligence is video and 5G. I mean, when it becomes really cheap and you can video everything and store it and share it and analyze it, I mean, it just opens up an entire new world for maintaining and improving transportation sector. And then I mentioned education. I mean, we're talking about not just connecting kids to their Zoom classrooms, but we're talking about transforming a generation through making education available through these IoT devices and through connections and content that they never could access before. I mean, I imagine in 10 years, we are not going to have nearly as much of a footprint in higher education universities. We talk about forgiving $1 trillion in debt. Well, what about just making half of those programs available online with reusable content and then monitoring it better and using IoT devices to improve that experience? And now you bent the cost curve. So you don't have to forgive every generation's $1 trillion worth of debt, but you just bring the cost down and you deliver a better experience. I mean, who would want their local community college to be teaching them calculus when somebody could be teaching, from Harvard could be teaching them calculus for a quarter of the price, right? So how do we make that all happen in education, and how do we use that to improve the outcomes? So those are just three areas where we see a lot of growth happening, and we're trying to take advantage of with our solution set. Sorry, I went the wrong way. So you talk about somebody like Kajeet. I mentioned that we're an IoT solutions, a managed IoT solutions company. So what are you looking for in an IoT connectivity partner? Well, first you need to have hardware. You need to have a network. We happen to be hardware and carrier agnostic. You want network reliability and coverage, of course, whether that's private or public. You need to be able to have the managed services and logistics. Nobody wants to deal with 15 different device manufacturers and 3 different network carriers and all that stuff. You want a feature-rich IoT management platform so that you can self-activate, deactivate, set content, filtering, whatever types of updates you want to push to the device, controls, etc. You need advanced analytics and actionable alerts. So you want to know what's happening. I'll give you a couple of examples of some things that really bring intelligence to these devices. And you want security, scalability. It's scary how fast things are changing and how maintaining the security. If you're an end user, you're a corporation that's trying to go and put your foot in and become more efficient at something, and IoT is not your core competency, how quickly you expose your business to risk. So having somebody that knows and understands that entire, from the network to the application to the end device, and can secure that end to end, is critically important. And then you want to be able to speed the market. You got to get stuff out there fast. When the competition is moving very quickly, you need to be able to get there and beat them to it. So what are some of the challenges? Some of the challenges you see in IoT deployments, I just mentioned one of them, which is the disparate ecosystem. You want to be able to take advantage of lots of different types of devices, networks, capabilities, features, etc. Put them in a way which I'm building to the IoT intelligence part of it, and you want it to be turnkey. It's very difficult. So a lot of companies just say, I can't deal with that. I need to go to a partner who can put all that together for me. I mentioned security and privacy, of course, and then another one is the adoption of new technologies. It doesn't matter if that happens to be 5G, edge computing, machine learning, eSIMs, all these things that make people's heads spin, like how do I capture all this? I was in a couple of sessions earlier, they said so many acronyms, I spent half the time just writing down acronyms, I spent an hour after the session just looking them up to even understand what half of them were. So, who wants to deal with all of that? So these are a lot of the challenges that people face. And, I kind of want to go back to one thing, just to tell a personal story around healthcare. I really truly believe that IoT devices can change people's lives, and I talk about intelligence, and I'm going to get into a couple of examples here in a second. But I wanted to start with this one because it's kind of important to me. My father had Alzheimer's, and that poor guy did not want to lose his autonomy. So he wanted to drive. He was in his 80s, and he still wanted to drive. We had to take his keys away, because we didn't want him to get in the car and show up, 15 miles away, calling up one of us and saying, I have no idea where I am. So we didn't want to also, at the same time, make him feel diminished, so we hid his keys. And this poor guy, every day would get up and want to go to McDonald's and get his cup of coffee, and he would say to my mom, Doris, where's my keys? And she would say, oh, honey, I don't know. And she'd say, well, we can just drive my car. And so every day for like 2 years, this guy really thought he lost his keys every single day. While it's funny, at the same time, it just shines a light on some of the things that can improve somebody's life. And so one of the things that we did was smartwatch. Get the guy a smartwatch, and if he wanders off because he's frustrated because he can't drive to McDonald's and he wants to take off walking, I could have that smartwatch. I'm watching it on my phone. I can set an alert. He gets outside of a certain area. I'm going to call him up, or I'm going to go find him. So that's one example. And then finally, another one that related to my father was when he was in the hospital. He was in the ICU, and it was very difficult for all the kids spread all around the country to kind of check in on him, and it was kind of sad. So we set up one of those Alexa Show devices, and every one of us had access to it, and we dropped in 24/7 right next to his bed, talking to him. He was like, what is this magic box? I mean, you guys just appear out of nowhere all the time. This is insane. So again, I really think that how we apply it in our everyday lives, not just for making people's lives better, but also improving profits, revenue streams, etc., because people want this. And so how do you take advantage of that? So I'll give you a quick example here of one of our solutions. We call it a smart bus. So let's say, this could apply to any kind of transportation, but I'll use one as our schools, for instance. We have about 3,000 school districts as customers of ours. And so they'll pull in a bus on a Friday, and we will put a 5G modem in it. We'll hook up video cameras that face the kids getting on and off the bus. We'll put a camera on the little stop arm, so that if you stop and you put out the arm and somebody drives past it, it'll take a picture of the license plate, which, by the way, happens to be a revenue source for them, because not only does the ticket go out and revenue goes to the county, but it also gets split with the schools, so that's a win-win. It connects Wi-Fi for the students who are on the bus so that they can access and do their homework. It then also does content filtering, because there's a lot of content we don't want them to see. It keeps track of kids getting on and off the bus. It keeps geolocation, so you know where the bus is. If you want to tell your students, we're running 10 minutes late, don't stand out in the freezing cold. There's a lot that can happen there, but you can then use all of that information that's happening in this one solution to create an incredible experience for safety, access, etc. within that with that particular thing. And then you can optimize your buses and the routes, etc. based on that information. So that just happens to be one. We have various products, and what I'll say generally about Kajeet, and I hope you find this with any of the providers that you choose to do business with, is a solution that happens to be very modular. And so you see some of the modules over here on the right, the top things being support and then security, and then the middle being the analytics and intelligence, the controls on the devices, and then down below, whether it's a private or a public network, how it all gets connected. This happens to be one solution that we take various pieces and parts of our solution, and then of our product portfolio, and we configure them into this one solution. And I'll give you one more example. This works, there we go. Tremendous growth in EV charging. I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars were just allocated for EV charging. We want to get rid of this whole energy problem, so let's go electric vehicles. Great. They're going to pop up everywhere. So how do you manage these things? How do you make money on them? How do you make sure that there's return on investment for the manufacturers of cars, for the businesses where you put them, the people that manufacture the equipment, run the service, etc. So in this solution, a little bit different. We take different components than we had before. Maybe we're not doing content filtering and all the video and all the other things we talked about. But here we're talking about, I want revenue continuity. Well, to have revenue continuity, you probably want a few things. Number one, you don't want this device to be hacked. So we have something that we call direct access, which is a fancy way of saying the traffic never goes on the internet. We have a VPN tunnel from that device through our cellular connections, our backhaul network, right out to whatever the server is that you want to connect it to, and there's a non-addressable IP. Now you can push updates to it, you can set telemetry, nobody can hijack it, get free revenue off of it, download viruses on it, etc. So in this particular solution, you're looking at something like that as being an important feature. You also want to be able to know if something is happening with that device. Maybe it's not working. Maybe it's not giving a full power charge. Maybe it's being used 24/7, which doesn't seem right. So to be able to look at everything that's happening on this device, and in real time, we're talking about streaming all this information in real time into our systems, it is spitting out alerts and notifications. One of those might even be, hey, you got 50 of these things lined up in front of a stadium and you're losing a lot of revenue right now because none of them are charging and you got an event going on. You need to get a truck out there. So why even call somebody up? Just send a trouble ticket, roll a truck, right? So these are the kind of things that you can use in terms of building in intelligence. It's going to allow you to take that full solution from the device all the way through the connectivity, security, etc., and then make decisions on it. You might also look at it and say, there's traffic going to a destination that's an endpoint in China. That should never be happening. So what do you want to do? I want to set that into a suspend mode, send an alert out to somebody. They need to check that device before we allow it to come back online. Lots of different things you can do. But it's all about bringing in that information and having all the access across network, device, and the applications that are running on it to make those better decisions. I could speak an hour on machine learning and how you put different cohorts in to study them and optimize your network, but not going to get into that today. But it's just expanding so fast. It's a really exciting topic for us. So in summary, I'll just say, it's just really important how you use these devices, how you build your solutions, whether you are a nonprofit, whether you are a business that's trying to make money, whatever it is that your mission is, taking full advantage of the full ecosystem is incredibly important. It's difficult to do this. You need your connections to be smart, timely. All the stuff that we do is streaming real-time information in our data warehouse and sending out real-time alerts. And you need to be able to make those informed business decisions, either through a person or through a set of predefined automated decisions, or a machine learning process that, as it learns, tweaks and makes decisions based on the new cohort analysis that happens, every day. And finally, I hope that you get the right solution provider. Now, it should be easier than ever, even though it tends to be more and more difficult. Go find yourself somebody who can put it all together for you and really optimize the value of your investment. That's all I have today. Happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Of course. So are you doing kitting for people when necessary?
Absolutely. So we have a series of different types of devices, from modems to embedded Chromebooks to sensors to everything from chicken farms to buses, as I talked about, to first responders, all kinds of different solutions. And we will go and work with those device manufacturers, bring them in, certify them on our network, make sure they work in all the use case scenarios. We'll kit them up if you want. We'll white label it. We will we'll slap a Kajeet on there if you want it to be branded Kajeet. If you want it to be branded, whatever your company is, we'll slap that on there. We'll ship them out, and if there's a problem, we take the first call. We'll send out a replacement device, the whole thing, white gloves.
So reverse logistics as well, okay.
Yes, sir.
So what's the largest clientele you've got in terms of product fulfillment that you've been working on? Like, should I be thinking of you like a Cynex and those kind of guys, or where is the borderline between you? Because you're more application focused, which I consider a good thing. And I'm just wondering, I've got guys who, like Ingram Micro do, anything but not the solution. And then I got you guys who are doing the solution and the kitting. So where's the balance? Where do you find your clientele sit there and say, I want to work with you guys?
Right, so we work best with embedded solution providers. And what I mean by that is we aren't usually the brand, with the exception of education. We have a big name in education. Almost every school district knows us. And we tend to kit and label everything as Kajeet because they know the brand Kajeet. Outside of education, though, we tend to work more with lots of resellers. We work with a lot of cable companies. Charter's one of our largest resellers. We support Spectrum Mobile, so 3.5 million lines of service that we run their entire mobile solution set for them as an MVNO. We have
on the voice side or on the security side or both?
So as a cable company, for instance, you might be selling cable service. You might then say, I want to add on into my bundle, cable, internet, and now I want cell phone as well. So we would take the cell phone piece of that, provision AT&T, Verizon, whatever it is, do all the billing, e-commerce, etc., package all that stuff up, work with the cable provider, and then they would integrate that into a single bill. So we basically run all the systems from provisioning all the way through. And so I wouldn't say we're necessarily an applications company. We're really an IoT connectivity and solutions company. We don't build everything. We don't build devices. We work with a lot of device manufacturers, and we have some relationships with people like Orbic and Cradlepoint and others that will build to certain specifications for us or give us certain APIs so that we can do a lot of things on their devices that normal people wouldn't be able to do, that we can put under one pane of glass to let them to do device management and things. Similarly with all the carriers, you can self-service activation. You don't have to deal with the carriers. You can just do all that within our applications. We do private networks. If you want to create your own private network, say in a school system or a hospital network or whatever, private LTE. So we tend to sell a lot through our partners like CDW, and we have agreements with Samsung and other equipment manufacturers I mentioned, and then we have application partners like Verizon's Blue Jeans and BC and others, where their applications will sit on top of the devices that we go from acquisition to kitting to logistics to connecting it to various network connections to the analytics, etc., and we'll push that out. And sometimes it's sold through just third-party resellers in whatever industry it is, and they'll white label it. We'll white label it to whatever it is that they want to sell it as.
And are you are you acting as an MVNO in this case, or borderline MVNE? Where do you see yourself?
Yeah, I say we move between MVNO and MVNE. Like, we're more of an MVNE, like I said, with like Charter, somebody like that. We're more of an MVNE. MVNO in the sense where we are providing the PLTE network. Then obviously we're our own network operator. In some cases, we are, running the entirety of the traffic. So we have we are an MNO, but we kind of bounce back and forth.
Okay.
Depending on the needs of a customer and the solution they want.
You do whatever it takes. I get it.
Pretty much.
Okay, and back to the education side. So you did all this work back when the pandemic hit.
Right.
What's driving your activities now in education?
So we were in a lot of K through 12 back before the pandemic hit, trying to connect. I think there was something like 11 million students that did not have broadband. That went to suddenly many, many, many more students, millions that didn't have computers and broadband to be able to do their Zoom classes. That's cooled off now. So instead, we've moved more into higher education. I mentioned some of the smart bus type stuff. We've expanded also into public sector. So a lot of the things that we were kind of doing in education with local governments, et cetera, has now expanded into other parts, whether that's, utility service type stuff, any of the government related components. There's still a tremendous amount of funding in education. They're still trying to close that gap, but it's slowed down a little bit since they're not doing Zoom classrooms as much.
So any other questions from the audience? Andy? Have you two talked yet? Okay, then let's give them a round of applause and let's move on.
Thanks everybody for your time. Appreciate it.